Have you ever thought that God is into investments? Well, in a way, he is. I put up on the board here ROI, which is kind of a financial term. It means return on investment. Does God expect a return on his investment? I think in a way, he absolutely does. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians 7:7 that says each one of us has his own gift from God. That's 1 Corinthians 7:7. So God's given us a gift. You could say that God, in a way, has invested in us. Now, it's also interesting then to see what Christ said about that return, about the return on investment. Over in the book of John, John chapter 15, Christ says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. You see, part of that return God expects as he's invested in us, he's given us his Spirit for one thing, he expects a return on that investment. He expects fruit to be born, spiritual fruit, spiritual growth to be born from his investment. Now, it's also interesting when you compare that to the other letters that I put up here on the board. DUB, it stands for the Days of Unleavened Bread. There's also a connection to God's holy days when it comes to what God expects of each one of us. In fact, if we go back to 1 Corinthians again, just across the page in my Bible, in 1 Corinthians, it's in chapter 5, we see a little bit about this return that he talks about here. Beginning in verse 7, Christ says, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump. So we're supposed to be unleavened. Then he says, let's keep the feast in verse 8. And he says, not with the leaven of malice and wickedness. Nope, that's not it. But with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So once again, we find God expects a return on his investment. We're supposed to be a new creation in Christ. We're supposed to put away that old sinful man and give God that return that he expects, especially during the days of unleavened bread. And that return should be a life that is in sincerity, a life that is in truth, a life that is unleavened, a life that is striving to live sin-free. And boy, if we do that, then we truly are giving God a return on his investment. That's BT Daily. We'll see you next time.